This is now an absolute Bitcoin twist. Edward Snowden could now also receive a pardon from Donald Trump, just like Ross Ulbricht. And this could trigger the next Bitcoin earthquake. Just like the Bitcoin community has also received the news about Ross Ulbricht very positively, even if it hasn't caused a massive price jump yet. But we're seeing for the first time that during an official confirmation hearing, Tulsi Gabbard is officially defending Ross Ulbricht here. And it looks like the tide is turning. All of a sudden, Ross Ulbricht is no longer a traitor. All of a sudden, Edward Snowden is no longer a traitor. And possibly here, Julian Assange is no longer a traitor. Even big names like Elon Musk seem to have inquired about this. With Donald Trump, whether they can pardon Edward Snowden and also Julian Assange. This is ultimately what Elon Musk is asked here on Twitter, and he said he would check in with Donald Trump about it. But there are also Bitcoin bigwigs here, like billionaire Jack Dorsey, who wrote here yesterday or the day before, "Hey, let Julian Assange and Edward Snowden finally be free." And like I said, these are ultimately very, very important key players for Bitcoin. You just have to understand this, that these kinds of stories, like if Julian Assange, Edward Snowden, and Ross Ulbricht are released, would definitely cause a bit of a shakeup. Because these people also represent the values of Bitcoin. Because Edward Snowden was only able to make his leaks possible through Bitcoin. Because he has censorship-resistant money through Bitcoin. He was able to bring certain things to light that wasn't public before. He was able to warn people before the surveillance of the US that privacy is in danger. Of course, he might have broken the law here in the US, but now there's this hearing. Tulsi Gabbard, who in the end, then they say, yeah, who cares if he broke the law? He was fighting for the good of humanity. Just like Julian Assange, he might have broken the law. But it has here. He fought for the good of humanity or helped humanity here by uncovering certain things here that weren't otherwise out in the open, by bringing the truth to light. And this whole thing is going a bit viral right now. We also have Thomas Macy here, who, by the way, is also advocating for this, abolishing the Federal Reserve, the central bank here in the U.S. He published a bill there. I don't think that's going to go through, or I don't even know if that's still relevant. But in any case, he did something like this about half a year ago or so. It was published really widely that the Federal Reserve should be abolished. There was a bill and stuff like that. He's also doing the survey. Should Edward Snowden be pardoned here? And they say 94% yes. Here he also comments on that. President Donald Trump should pardon Edward Snowden. He's a national hero because he exposed the blatant violations of the Constitution by the Bush and Obama administrations. And Edward Snowden, he always speaks out about Bitcoin. He's been to a lot of Bitcoin conferences already. He's a big advocate for Bitcoin, but he's also a critic. Warning, he always says, hey, privacy with Bitcoin, and so on. It's not as good as one might think. That could definitely be better. And that's why Edward Snowden is a very, very important player for Bitcoin. Not just because he's a Bitcoin OG, but because he definitely has some good points of criticism that can definitely be discussed here in the Bitcoin community. And now listen to the confirmation hearing here in the Senate, where Tulsi Gabbard is basically sitting up front and getting hit hard. And basically, her people are demanding that she admit that Edward Snowden is a traitor, that he's really, really bad, that he's basically a traitor or something like that. But Tulsi Gabbard isn't getting rattled here. By the way, she's also here. Bitcoin supporter. She has spoken positively about Bitcoin. I don't know if she owns Bitcoin herself, but she's definitely a Bitcoin supporter. And Tulsi Gabbard is the director of national intelligence here in the USA. And that's why, of course, what she says here really has some punch. And now check this out, how she's being targeted here and how she really stands her ground.
Let me ask you again, do you believe, as the chairman of this committee believes, as the vast majority of members of our intelligence agencies believe, that Edward Snowden was a traitor to the United States of America?
Senator, if confirmed as
This is when the
Director of
rubber
National
hits the road.
Intelligence,
This is
I will work with you to make sure that there is not another Snowden like
social
leak.
media. It's not a moment to propagate theories, conspiracy theories, or attacks on journalism in the United States. This is when you need to answer the questions of the people whose votes you're asking for to be confirmed as the chief intelligence officer of this nation. As my colleague said, this is not about you. It's about the people that serve the intelligence agencies of the United States.
So you can already see how massive pressure is being applied here. They don't even let her finish. Tulsi Gabbard and so on, basically shouting at her. They're saying here, yes, the official positions, they all say that Edward Snowden is a traitor and so on. But like I said, we'll take a look at that in just a moment. There's a big difference between what the official positions say. So you throw out some names, some big personalities, who are sitting here in the state. Of course, they're basically here. On the other hand, if anyone here is dealing with state documents or something like that, of course, they're against whistleblowers and stuff like that. She's basically being asked here, basically saying yes here. Edward Snowden is a traitor. But keep listening. She remains steadfast here. And don't say here that Edward Snowden is a traitor. But she clearly stands her ground, that Edward Snowden is not a traitor.
Is Edward Snowden a traitor to the United States of America? That is not a hard question to answer when the stakes are this high.
Senator, as someone who has
your
served
answer,
in
yes
uniform,
or no, is Edward Snowden a traitor to the United States of America?
as someone who has
I'll go on
worn
to
our
my
uniform
questions.
in combat, I understand how critical our national security
Apparently
is.
you don't. Apparently you don't. Let me ask you. I've worked very hard to.
And that's always the great democracy here. That is being talked about. So democracy is great as long as people say what others want to hear. That means if Tulsi Gabbard had said here, yes, he is a traitor and so on, then everything would have been fine. Then they would have said, yes, here very democratically and blah, blah, blah. And here, she says Edward Snowden is basically a traitor. But when you stand against the mainstream here, you see how you get put through the ringer. And these are really unfair stories that are happening here. So here it's basically, just cut her off, he's just talking about her. She has no opportunity to justify herself here, to make her statements here, so to speak. Because, of course, you can't just say, okay, yes or no. You have to explain it. You also have to justify the argument. You also have to say, okay, Edward Snowden may not be a traitor because, yes, he may be on one side. The law that exists here in the USA was broken. But on the other hand, he warned a lot of people about it and maybe even protected them. From privacy violations, he ultimately exposed some serious wrongdoing. That would have never come to light otherwise. And that is in the best interest of the people. And you really have to distinguish here, okay, on one hand there's a right, but on the other hand, there might also be something like a service to humanity when you uncover crimes, let's say, when you find out about them. Okay, Germany did something bad, the US did something bad. Or people were monitored here, people were killed here. Or whatever else happened, you still have to, even though it might not be legally allowed here. If you can't publish classified documents from the US, then you still have to find a way to bring it to the public. Just for the reason that lives are at stake here. And that's basically what Tulsi Gabbard is trying to say here. But what she's not allowed to elaborate on, because she's being canceled the whole time. Here, she's being drowned out, people are talking over her, and that's just outrageous. Edward Snowden also says here about this interrogation, he said, the Intelligence Committee. The Senate spent almost the entire session today in a lengthy and detailed discussion, strongly urging Tulsi Gabbard to personally condemn me. About 94% of Americans are against this position now. For 10 years, courts have found that the NSA has violated the law. People keep going, and in the end, Edward Snowden is basically urging everyone to keep pushing forward. Just like here with Ross Ulbricht, they kept going and eventually convinced the entire, let's say, the population of the USA. Because, hey, these are not bad people. They ultimately acted in the best interests of the American people. But of course, if you're sitting on the US side and you're basically an official from the US, then I totally get why Edward Snowden is viewed so critically. That means anyone who somehow attacks the narrative, anyone who attacks the status quo, anyone who somehow attacks the official opinions of major nations. He's putting himself in a really dangerous position. And that's why Bitcoin is so important, because Bitcoin is becoming more important. The more you address critical content. If you just go with the status quo, if you just do your own thing. Nobody criticizes you, you don't stand out, you just go along with the crowd, you're just a sheep in the system. Then Bitcoin is obviously pretty unimportant. Because then the account will not be censored. Then you will not be excluded from the banking system. Then you may not be somehow here. Condemned in America, or who knows what else could happen. Something new has now remained in exile, where now since, who knows how many years it's been. And that's basically the important takeaway here. Yes, Bitcoin, for people who are really uncovering leaks like this, or like Julian Assange or something, who are really vital in this situation. There's also another comment. At least 5 senators called out Tulsi here today, calling Snowden a traitor and making it clear that their refusal could jeopardize their nomination. So then people say here, hey, if you carry on like this and don't say certain things, then you might get kicked out of your political positions. Then it goes on to say she declined because she doesn't believe that at all, you know. She doesn't believe the whole story that Edward Snowden is ultimately a traitor. Refusing to follow orders, saying things you don't believe, is a rare trait in DC. And you hate it. So the left is totally losing it right now. They're completely freaking out. Because suddenly there are people who won't let themselves be oppressed. There are people who won't be blackmailed. Suddenly there are people standing up for freedom. Suddenly there are people who are standing up for democratic values here. Standing up for the right to express your opinion freely. That you can also criticize things here. That you can also bring things up that were actually considered taboo topics. And they obviously hate that. Leftist people, they hate state-believing folks. They hate people who want to maintain the status quo. And that's why this is, of course, such an important thing here for Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is the same. Bitcoin is under attack. Bitcoin is being targeted. And now is basically the time when Bitcoin can really win. Because people are starting to speak up and they're starting to realize, hey, you can't really ban it, whatever. And that's why we're just joining the movement. And then there are more and more people who are speaking out for it, who have the courage to step up here. And we can see that a lot is changing in the USA. Things are now moving more towards that way, freedom-oriented movement. Also, that Donald Trump is bringing in people who will have a direct influence on him is really interesting. That's definitely very interesting, because Tulsi Gabbard was also appointed here by Donald Trump, I think. Suggested or appointed. I'm not sure, one of the two. And they must be in touch with each other. Contact. And Tulsi Gabbard here. She is partner, he also makes decisions at times. Get Donald Trump on board and say, hey, Donald, what's up? We could pardon Edward Snowden here. But hey, guys, feel free to drop me a line down below. Leave a comment about what you think about all this. Do you think it's a good idea when people publish secret documents from governments, for example, where it basically says that you're being systematically monitored? Where it basically says how you're being spied on, and stuff like that, where a whole lot of espionage stories ended up coming to light. Because problem, what's up? The problem is when you set precedents like this, like with Julian Assange or Edward Snowden or Ross Ulbricht, then of course other people here are also feeling uneasy, intimidated. Of course, they won't bring any leaks or anything like that to light, because they're scared. Here somehow 10 years in prison, or like with Ross Ulbricht, a couple of life sentences in prison, even though he didn't leak anything, but also did other things here, what SHE. People are intimidated because of the platforms that have been built and so on. That's why regulation is important, that this is happening here in the USA, that you can ban certain things here. For crypto and stuff like that, it opens up for freedom of speech and so on. That's something that can't be taken away anymore. So feel free to let me know in the comments what you think about it. And here's an important announcement. Next Thursday on the 8th, in February, I'm going to introduce you to my new Bitcoin community, Bitcoin Advantage. We've already got almost 1,000 signups here. It's really crazy. And for everyone who's here on the live call, there are actually prizes worth 5,000 euros to be won here. If you want to join the live call, just click the link below that I'll put in the description. And if you want to buy Bitcoin now, definitely check out 21 Bitcoin, the easiest way to buy Bitcoin in Europe. Here, you can still get up to 20% off the fees when buying Bitcoin with the code Bitcoin. Absolutely recommend it, guys. See you soon. See ya. Peace out.